October and moved directly to Virginia Beach, Virginia. And the reason I did that, as many of you already know, is because I started to notice that there was a very compelling connection between what was happening to me and what had happened to Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce is a historical figure who was born in 1877, died in 1945, and he did these psychic readings where he would go into a state of trance and then document people's medical problems. He would diagnose the problem, and it would speak as a we. There was a source that introduced itself as a we. And in certain instances in the Edgar Cayce contact, it didn't happen too often, something very profoundly disturbing would happen. It wasn't really disturbing maybe, but it could be considered that way. And this was Archangel Michael. So in my new book, The Michael Prophecies, which is available at thedisclosure.com, I have now 5 books where I've taken this period of time from 1996 to 1999, and I've taken almost everything that came through me telepathically through this process, and I'm publishing it now, and I've got 2 of them out. The next one is about to come out, hopefully within a few days. I wanted to make sure I was ready to do this video and do it well. But this is what's getting ready to happen, is I'm ready to come out with Book 2, Volume 2, which will be the 3rd volume altogether. And then the volumes 4 and 5 are actually very close to being finished, so I only expect to take another, hopefully, no more than a few weeks to do this. All right, so what is it that happened? As I chunked out these readings, and I'm reading also and learning about Edgar Cayce, I go to Virginia Beach and I end up living with someone who had been friends with Edgar Cayce's secretary, Gladys Davis Turner, as she was later known. Originally just Gladys Davis. So he was best friends with her. He sought her out. He came all the way out to Virginia Beach. He was a huge Edgar Cayce fan, the world's biggest Edgar Cayce fan. He became friends with her secretary. He got all the inside stories, and I ended up living with him for over half a year. And this is when I first found out that Edgar Cayce had levitated in some of these readings, but even more bizarre than that was that as his voice was speaking, it was like somebody had the bass speakers on from some kind of kickbox in a car stereo way too loud. What do I mean by way too loud? I mean that as the voice is speaking, everything in the whole house is reverberating from the sounds of the voice. The walls, the floors, your body, the vibration is so intense that people would feel like they were going to get knocked off of their chair. As the voice keeps speaking, your body would start to inch off the chair. You have to get yourself back on the chair. They were hearing the knives and forks rattling inside the silverware container in the kitchen cupboards. They were hearing windows opening and closing. They were hearing doors slamming shut and opening again. And you got this body levitating, I don't know how far off the table. There didn't appear to be any visual phenomena other than the body levitating. I don't think there was any light per se that was visible to the naked eye, at least. But this was incredible. To go to Virginia Beach, to do this pilgrimage, if you will. I've driven 20 hours on the I-95. It is an incredibly horrible drive. If you take the time and don't try to go too fast, you got to stop a few times. And then I get there to Virginia Beach, and I find out that Edgar Cayce has had this whole issue with Archangel Michael, because that's the name of the being that would come through when he was levitating off the table, and his voice would shake the walls. This entity wouldn't always begin, but it was a very forceful alpha male kind of thing, and in fact, in the Law of One series, whenever they do mention Michael, they say Michael represents the divine masculine. So it's sort of like the purest spiritual masculine energy distilled into its form. That's what Archangel Michael is. And in the Bible, Archangel Michael is described as the highest angel of God. It's probably good that I don't have a salivary reflex anymore when I'm talking, because that meant I was talking too much. Okay, so when this contact came through, it was a very intense experience for everyone in the room. They would cry. Some people would start spasming and go into like a religious ecstasy situation because it just keeps on happening. The voice keeps on speaking and the whole frickin' house is shaking and you just have a totally paranormal freak out. That's what would happen to people. Or they just frickin' cry their eyes out and they'd just be sobbing and wailing. And it was a very loud, very forceful voice. And it turns out that some of the things that it said, even from like the very first time that it appeared in 1928, are highly prophetic of what's going on now in today's world. There's some pretty shocking Edgar Cayce / Archangel Michael stuff. So I didn't even know that Edgar Cayce had gotten Archangel Michael until I went to Virginia Beach in October 97, a full year after this contact started. But one of the reasons why I went to Virginia Beach is that the guy who I was working with in New York State, who had the ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment charter up there, he was an expert. He'd had 40 years of experience, expert hypnotherapist. He put me under hypnosis, and really strange stuff started to happen. I started to speak as, it didn't identify as Archangel Michael yet. It called itself Grandfather. And then there was a female that called itself Lucia or Lucinda. And this apparently was Saint Lucia, which I never even looked up until I just wrote this book and then found out, oh yeah, this is this saint from the Scandinavian countries. The idea was that these beings apparently had given me their DNA. They say in this conversation they have with Skip Weatherford, his name was, that I have been involved in what they called their extraterrestrial space program. And so they said that I was involved in an extraterrestrial space program in the year 1997. They didn't say secret space program, but they said extraterrestrial space program. Then they said that I had been through sexual assault in this program. And I somehow just walled that stuff off and didn't pay attention to it, didn't go back and look at it, because I had no memory of anything like this. I mean, I'd had, a lot of strange stuff in my childhood I've talked about before. Lots and lots of what appeared to be UFO visitations, dreams that don't really seem like dreams. It's only when I went back and read this stuff now that everything started to make sense of what they were talking about and what it means for the implications of humanity. But getting back to when I was under hypnosis with Skip, you can read that session in book 1, I believe. It's of the Michael prophecies. Again, it's available on thedisclosure.com. And we do have an insider code that you can apply if you've watched this show to get $22 off. The word is Ascension in all capital letters. So if you type in the word Ascension, and this is only going to work until I finish the books. Until I finish, I think we're only going to do it until I finish the next volume. So it'll only be a few days. But for the next few days, if you type in the word Ascension in all capital letters, you get $22 off at thedisclosure.com. So here I am working for $5.77 an hour. Then I go down to Virginia Beach after Skip Weatherford has told me that my face looks exactly like Edgar Cayce. Now bear in mind that when he had me under and Archangel Michael and Saint Lucia come out, he was getting his mind read, and they were answering his questions before he could even ask them out loud. And another really strange thing that happened is I couldn't keep my eyes closed. So I had my eyes open, and my pupils, of course my eyes are normally blue, my pupils were dilated basically black. Like you would get if you took a psychedelic drug. But I wasn't on any drugs at all. So that was all very interesting. And I go to Virginia Beach, and then everybody in Virginia Beach who is associated with the Edgar Cayce work starts to recognize that I look like Edgar Cayce. Very, very much. In fact, Nawab Indian Restaurant, I met the director of the Edgar Cayce Association's magazine, Venture Inward. I believe his name's Bob Smith. And when he walked into the restaurant, I was actually sitting in a chair, and I looked over at him like this. Let's see if I can get it right. It was about like that. That's the way he saw me. And he had just been editing a picture for the magazine where Edgar Cayce had been in this exact position, and he said that he nearly fell over backwards because the face was identical. And it is. I mean, it's a shocking, shocking facial resemblance, which Skip Weatherford had no problem seeing. Nobody else had a problem seeing when I got to Virginia Beach. Then eventually I decided to look at the astrology, and that was in November of the same year. I got there in October, I think. Yeah, in October. And then when I looked at the astrology, all the planets are in very similar positions between the two charts. And this is way, way, way beyond coincidence. In fact, an independent astrologer audited this data and found out that my birth date, time, and location is the closest match to Edgar Cayce that you get in 127 years after his death. The closest planetary match you could ever have is the exact day, month, year, and time and location that I was born. So that's just data. That's empirical data. Do I believe that I was Edgar Cayce in another lifetime? I certainly have memories as if I was. Everything would appear to validate that research. And of course, when I got to Virginia Beach, I also found out Dr. Ian Stevenson had done research on 4,000 different children, mostly in the Middle East, who claimed to remember their past lives. And he had thousands of examples of children accurately remembering details from what was apparently another lifetime. And they would even be able to solve unsolved murders, describe the paintings that were on the wall in a house, where the bedrooms are, remembering everybody's names. I mean, some of these cases got really, really crazy. But one of the most significant aspects of all of these reincarnation cases was that there was a facial similarity, a very striking facial similarity, between the child in this incarnation and what they had looked like in their previous incarnation that they remembered. Then Dr. Jim Tucker followed up on the research of Dr. Ian Stevenson, and Dr. Jim Tucker used forensic police face matching software and confirmed that these people's faces matched with the previous incarnations they allegedly had. Then I have this incredible face match, which multiple researchers, reincarnation researchers, portrait artists were all saying this is the best match we've ever seen. I had a dentist tell me that even the teeth matched. I've never heard it, but somebody said there's a recording of Edgar Cayce on this old can thing, and his voice sounds just like my voice, but with a southern accent. So this was very fascinating, obviously, because there's this Archangel Michael thing that happened to Edgar Cayce where his body levitated, and it spoke in a very authoritative way. Well, I continued to do these readings through the year 1997, a few times a week, 1998 and 1999. And then, as my life went on and I became a public figure, I realized that people were very negative about this Edgar Cayce stuff. And it wasn't just a casual dislike. It was a very intense, villainous, criminal, evil hatred that people would have. It's been really intense. And so I have absolute empathy for anybody in the gay community, because being gay would be a much easier thing to deal with than being the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. It really would. Having this thing out there gave people such easy, low-hanging fruit to just make a complete mockery out of me. And that's what seemed to keep happening. So that was really my experience. And I was talking about it with Richard C. Hoagland once I got into, his inner circle. And he said, look, just let go of the whole thing. So I finally had a book come out about it called The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce with a question mark in 2004, which I co-authored with Winfrey. And he did a lot of it, but I did two very big edits that changed the whole manuscript drastically. I guess the third part is all my readings, and the second part is partly written by me. So anyway, after I got that book out in 2004, I felt like, okay, I've done my job. I was at Conscious Life Expo. I actually had somebody come up to me and make a death threat. And he actually told me that there were people at SRI International, I'm going to be honest about it now, that they were in contact with something or other, And the SRI International folks from Stanford, right now Stanford we find out is involved in a lot of interesting things having to do with online. Well, these SRI people are saying, if David continues to channel Edgar Cayce, which I'm not even doing, he will die. He will be killed. And this guy had already told me this a few times in writing, and he had the gall to come up to me at my book signing table and make this death threat in person. And that is actually the only time I've ever really